What is up, everybody? Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show for Sherdog.com. As we come towards the end of the year here and we look ahead, to the new year. One year just gone, a new one just begun, to steal a line from a famous song, I suppose. We tend to always at this time of the year to do this and go back and look at the awards, I suppose, that we just had, and I'm sure we'll see awards on Sherdog and further afield as well and all over the place. I hope Herb Dean won't be winning ref of the year, but maybe that's another podcast for another day. But I want to look forward today, and I want to do a bit of fantasy matchmaking, a bit of Shad Sheehan shoes here to take away from maybe Shad Shelby, and I want to look at the top 3 fights that I want to see next year. Now, These are my fights purely. These are not maybe, from like a matchmaking point of view or from like a sensible point of view maybe. Now, they actually are a bit, but we will get into that, and we will talk about them in a second. Now, there's loads of fights I would love to see, and loads of fights coming up that I want to see as well. Now, I might do another video with the 3 fights I'm most looking forward to that are actually happening, but these fights haven't been made yet. I think one of them especially definitely will be made, but the other 2, are kind of borderline, could happen. But I will get into them, each of them. There's some great fights coming up. Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno coming up. Really, really can't wait for that. Looks like Aljamain Sterling versus Jan is going to go up. That could have been one of my fights here, but I'm really looking forward to that. Maybe that'll be in another video. What's going to happen at featherweight with Volkanovski and Holloway. Looks like Charles Oliveira is going to fight Gaethje next. What a fun fight that would be. Although I would kind of prefer others. We'll get to the welterweight picture. That's one of mine. Looks like Leon Edwards might be able to get that shot finally. Adesanya, he's going to fight Whitaker. Well, if what the UFC say is correct. Glover looks like he's going to fight Prochazka. We have Reyes coming up again. And the heavyweight picture, we have that fight coming up as well at the start of next year. Then Amanda Nunes and Julianna, Pena as the champions, Rose Namajunas as the champ, Valentina Shevchenko as the champ. There's a little bit more unknown there, but there's a lot of fun matchups to look at throughout the whole year. But the 3 I'm looking at today are really fun. And the first one I'm going to give you is a guy we haven't seen in a long, long time. And that is Jon Jones. 26-1, hasn't fought since the start of the pandemic, all the way back in February. I always look at February of 2020 and February 2020, not February 2021. We're almost at February 2022, so it's almost 2 years since Jon Jones fought. And I always think about that Bellator Dublin show that I was at. That just seems like years ago at this stage, and that's how long it is since Jon Jones fought. So the fight I want to see is Jon Jones versus the heavyweight champion. Whether it's Francis Ngannou or Ciryl Gane who win that fight coming up here in January, the 22nd of January, that fight is on. So whoever wins that, I want to see them fighting Jon Jones. Look, we've talked for a long time about Jon Jones moving up in weight. We've talked for a long time about Jon Jones cleaning out the heavyweight division. No, he's not really, or the light heavyweight division, sorry. He's not really cleaned out the light heavyweight division at the moment because a lot of guys have come up. There's, look at Prochazka, who I just mentioned there. Jon Jones hasn't fought him, and, Jamal Hill on his way up, and Paul Craig, and Johnny Walker and others. Now, you might think, Jon Jones would make easy work of a lot of them, and maybe he would, but it's different at the moment. But at one stage, to circle back to the point, he had cleaned out that light heavyweight division, and we all wanted to see him go into heavyweight. I felt the same way about Habib in a lot of ways, that he hadn't cleaned out the division at all. I think he had 3 or 4 more lads maybe he could have fought, but I would have loved to have seen him going up to welterweight, fight Usman. That could have been one of my fantasy matchups as well. That's a fight I always want to see. But I feel like sometimes you see fighters like that. Everyone wanted Dimitri Johnson to go up to fight TJ Dillashaw that time. When guys are at that level, when they're at the very, very best, GSP going up to fight Anderson, people want to see him make that move, want to see him go up, want to see him have that big fight. And I feel like that's a thing that's been there for Jones for a long time. And now what we have now is something very special. And I was talking on a podcast the other day about this, is that no matter who the matchup is, whether it's Ciryl Gane or whether it's Francis Ngannou who's fighting Jon Jones, there's a different sort of question that Jon Jones needs to answer. Now, Jon Jones has answered lots of questions down through the years. The wrestler question with Cormier, you know, the karate question with Machida. He's fought hard hitters. He's fought good athletes. He's fought them all, beat them all. So you can't really question that with Jon Jones. But he also has been out of the cage for 2 years. He's also not been in heavyweight, and he's also gone up to fight guys who have skill sets like he has never seen before in a certain way, at a certain level, I suppose. I don't think he's ever fought anyone, he hasn't fought anyone who hits as hard as Francis Ngannou. He hasn't ever fought anyone who will leave it all on the line like Francis Ngannou will to knock you out. He has never fought anyone like that before. A fearless knockout artist who will go forward and all he wants to do is take your head off. That's what Francis Ngannou is, make no mistake about it, right? Will that be the person to beat Jon Jones? Maybe, maybe not. What he also hasn't faced, in my opinion, now he's faced a couple of guys like this, is a technician good enough to go up against him. And to me, that's what Ciryl Gane is. I think Ciryl Gane is the next incumbent of Jon Jones when we talk about the greatest fighter of all time, the person who would beat any other man to ever live in a hand-to-hand combat matchup. That to me, you know, it was always, people thought it's the heavyweight champion in boxing first, and obviously, you know, MMA fighters are far superior to boxers in terms of a real fight, hand-to-hand combat fight. And then we always thought it was, you know, whether it's Randy Couture or, you know, Brock Lesnar or Cain Velasquez or Stipe Miocic. But I think for a long time we did think it was Jon Jones, even though he was the light heavyweight champion. But now I think it's Ciryl Gane. I think he's the man. Now, he might lose to Francis Ngannou, absolutely, but if he does, it gives this matchup. If Francis wins, it gives a matchup I just spoke about. But that technical wizardry matchup between Ciryl Gane and Jon Jones is something that I would absolutely love to see. My favourite fighter of all time in terms of technique, not necessarily my favourite, the person who I think is the greatest fighter of all times is Demetrius Johnson, because I love the technical fighters. I think the best technical fighter is the best fighter. Wins, losses and all of that, to me, are secondary, right? But people will argue because, you know, he's smaller and everything like that. He's not, it's a bit different. When you have a bigger guy like Gane, like Jones, who both have the brilliant technical aspects of their game, it brings that together with, you know, the bone-crushing intensity, muscle, bone, blood, all of that together to a fascinating matchup that gives the technical purists who love it what they want, but also the heavyweight lovers what they want as well. That power and that intensity to the fight. That is a dream fight for me. Look, Francis Ngannou is a dream fight for me as well. If I had to pick one of them, it would be Gane versus Jones. Even though for a long time it would have been Francis versus Jones, but I'm after changing my mind on that one. But that's the first fight for me. I'm going to say I can't wait for the fight. I hope it happens. Now, Jon Jones, obviously, some legal issues and all. We can talk about that, and maybe that's a discussion for another podcast. And I've had that discussion on other podcasts as well. So it's definitely not something I'm looking over or anything like that. But if we're talking about pure fights, that is a pure fight. I would love to see Jon Jones versus the heavyweight champion. Jon Jones at heavyweight, first of all. Jon Jones versus Ngannou, a brilliant fight. And Jon Jones versus Gane as well, an even better fight for me. I want to see that fight in 2022. I want to see Jon Jones at heavyweight. I want to see Jon Jones back. Will the UFC pay him? Will he move up to heavyweight? Will he actually do it? Like, Jon Jones has always been a bit of a bully as an MMA fighter. He's always fought middleweights, you know. I had a stat up once, you maybe you'll be able to find it on my Twitter somewhere, one of my useless facts today, that Jon Jones has fought like 6, 7 middleweights, something like that, as a UFC champion in UFC title defenses. That's a lot of middleweights to be fighting. And, you know, I'm not slating Jon Jones or anything for that. That's just a matter of the fact. To go up and fight heavyweights is a different ball game. He is prepared for a long time. As I said, 2 years out of the cage. Very, very interesting to see if that does happen, and I'll be here to watch it if it does, and I can't wait. The next fight that I want to see happen after Jon Jones versus Gane is, I said I skipped the welterweight division, and I skipped it because I didn't want to give away my fight, but I want to see Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. And everyone might say, look, it's a little bit too early. And I'm a person who comes on here and on other podcasts in other places and talks about the young up-and-coming fighters, from my part of the world here in Ireland, or, the UK or abroad, whether it's a Sean O'Malley or a Jack Shore or an Ian Gary or whoever it might be. And I talk about matching them the right way, give them the slow roll to a slightly faster roll to the fast roll to contendership to a title. That's what I like to see. Unless it's Chimaev. Unless it's John Jones, unless it's someone special who is that outlier, who is ready for it, who is the guy and who immediately needs to fight the guy in that division. Make no mistake about it, Kamaru Usman, look, I still think GSP is the greatest welterweight of all time and will be for another couple of years yet, right? But the fact that, in my mind, as someone who kind of puts it out of the question a little bit, the fact in my mind, I think it might be a question soon, says enough about what Usman is. A fantastic fighter, a brilliant fighter, a very, very tough fighter to beat, fantastic wrestler. When he gets to the ground, brilliant. His jab is magnificent. Okay, his last outing I didn't think was his best, but previous fights, very, very good. And a guy who's constantly, I think, improving. Won't show up every day, won't be brilliant every day, but is brilliant as a fighter. He has the basis of a brilliant fighter in all areas. Fantastic, right? Chimaev just seems like that guy that is going to be tough. Is going to be tough not only to beat, but to stop him from beating you, if that makes sense. Like, when Li Jingliang is a brilliant fighter. Make no mistake about it. Maybe some people don't realize how good Lee is. He is a guy, he's an alpha male. This guy is a guy who doesn't get dominated by people. He is a guy who dominates people. He's a fantastic fighter. Okay, maybe he's never going to be a top 5 fighter. Maybe he's never going to be a champion. But he's not a nobody. He's not someone who, anybody, even the very, very top fighter, should have a really, really easy day against. Chimaev carried around, as the great Ben Fowlkes once said about Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg, like a bag of fertilizer. That's exactly what he did. He just, it was so easy. It was so easy for him. He just decimated him. And you kind of, like, Rhys McKee, I've covered Rhys McKee's whole career, literally from his amateur career and his debut against Johnny Jitsu. I know he's a good fighter. This is not a guy who can easily be beaten. And Chimaev destroyed him. He destroyed Mershart. He destroyed John Phillips. This guy is an insane fighter. And look, if he goes in there and loses to Usman, he can build his way back up. He can still come back. He can still fight. But if he goes in there and he beats Usman, he has risen to that level in this time that superstardom is going to take him to another level. A lot when Habib was on his way up, when he was fighting McGregor and all, everyone talked about, like, that side of the world. When he was out in Abu Dhabi and out in Fight Island fighting there, how huge it was in Russia as well. He was absolutely massive. Chimaev, if he can take that path that's quicker than Habib, that's more dominant than anyone we've ever seen to become a champion this early in his career, I think he could take that to the next level. Now, could he get to McGregor level? Maybe not. But the question is, could he? And now maybe Usman will stop all of that. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not saying this is a guarantee or anything. But someone rising that quickly and beating, if he does beat him, the pound for pound number 1 guy in the world can only mean superstardom, right? And that's grand, and that's that's big, and that's a reason to want to see the fight. But my reason to want to see the fight is fighter A versus fighter B. This is a meeting of unbelievable fighters. It's why I wanted to see TJ versus Demetrius in their pomp. It's why I want to see, Oliveira versus whoever it might be, Poirier, as we just saw, or Gaethje, or Makhachev, or Beneil Dariush. It's why I want to see Jones versus the heavyweights. It's why I wanted to see, Anderson Silva versus Jones back in the day, or GSP versus, Anderson Silva and all that. These are why you want to see these fights. This unknown who's going to win. Will Usman win? He probably will. He's a champion. He's great. Chimaev's still on the way. Will Chimaev win? How will Usman beat him? It is a fight I need answered. And I'm sorry to Leon Edwards. He deserves a title shot. No, he does. He's won so many fights in a row. He has he's really he's deserved it. He earns it, and he might get it. He'd probably get it, and maybe Chimaev will get it after him, and I'll still be happy. But I would give it to Chimaev right now. I think Chimaev deserves that fight right now. I think the UFC, if they're a proper promotion who want to promote this right, who want to give Chimaev the best chance to reach superstardom immediately, need to do it sooner rather than later. I think if they do it immediately and they do it right now and they have him fight Usman and he wins, he will take off to the next stratosphere, and I really want to see that fight as a fight as well. So that's it. Usman versus Chimaev is my number 2. John Jones versus the heavyweight champion is number 1. These are in no particular order as well. I'm just giving you my 3. Right, the third one I'm going for is a rematch, and it's Amanda Nunes versus Julianna Pena. This fight has to happen. It has to happen. The rematch has to happen. We need to see this again. We live in a world where, and I think Luke Thomas kind of said it on one of his podcasts, where there's too much assurity at times with us in MMA. We think this is going to happen. We know it's going to happen. The very best can never lose, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. And what's the reason for that? I spoke on my podcast before the fight as well. Will Amanda Nunes, still have the same drive, still have the same want? We talk about McGregor all the time, and he's silk pajamas and he's yacht with all his money. Can he get up for these fights anymore? Is it worth it to him? McGregor earning $3 million from a fight. What really does that matter when he's 120 million or whatever it might be in the bank? No, Amanda Nunes isn't as rich as Conor McGregor, but she's rich enough to live the rest of her life. She's drawn a lot of pay-per-view buys down through the years, being on UFC 200, being on some big cards with big buys, and I assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I assume she's getting pay-per-view points and has earned a lot of money, And I heard Julianna Pena talking about it afterwards. She's gone back to Brazil to live on a farm and different things. I'm sure that's not that expensive. I'm sure she can live wealthy for the rest of her life on that money. And is that a thing that's kind of, drawing her to not be as prepared for fights as she once was? Is that the issue? That's the question I want answered. And the only way to answer that is to see this rematch. Was it a fluke for Julianna? And by fluke, I mean, not necessarily a fluke, but a once-off. Was this the only time Julianna Pena can ever rise and fight like that? Was it a case of Julianna Pena being good enough to beat Amanda Nunes, or was it Amanda Nunes just not being that good on that night and not being prepared, not taking it seriously? I want all those questions answered. We need all those questions answered. Can Amanda Nunes bounce back and be the GOAT again? Or is this it? Is this that's the biggest question. Is this the end for Amanda Nunes at the very, very top level? Is this the end of the run of the greatest female fighter we have ever seen in mixed martial arts? Or is this the start of her maybe next rise to superstardom? Because if she wins this fight against Julianna Pena, this is the biggest fight of her career for me. I think it's bigger than the Ronda fight. It's bigger than the Cyborg fight in terms of importance for her. Now, you might not draw him or whatever, but it's huge. And if she wins it, what's going to be next? Is it going to be Kayla Harrison? Is it going to be Shevchenko then after that? Because, Harrison, that explains itself. I don't need to explain why that's huge if Nunes wins. But I think, and this is the point my friend Graham made to me over in the Severe MMA podcast, that every fighter, whether it's Shevchenko or Ketlin Vieira or whoever it might be coming up, now have an incentive to believe that they can beat Amanda Nunes. If Amanda Nunes had fought the next 5 challengers in a row and had beaten Julianna Pena, none of them would have the mindset that we can beat her because Julianna Pena beat her, if that makes sense. It gives them all not just an assumption, but a factual look at her getting beaten in a certain way. People know how she can beat, and they saw her lose. Once she was the greatest of all time. Look, they've seen her lose years ago. Who was it? Ngannou who beat her. But as Amanda Nunes said herself, I thought those problems were gone. Everyone else, I thought they were gone. Everyone watching here thought they were gone. But they're back. Those problems came back. And every future opponent is going to believe that they can bring on them out on her again. Whether it's another bad day from her, whether it's, her not being up for it again. So that makes every fight over the next while more intriguing than it had maybe any right to be. And it makes this rematch intriguing. Julianna Pena is in a really rough position because, the same for Frankie Edgar back in the day when he fought BJ Penn. The same for lots of fighters. You know, if you're someone who's to beat John Jones when he was a heavyweight champion, you have to fight him again and beat him again. You know, Frankie had to fight BJ and beat him again. It happens all the time. TJ and Cody, it happens all the time, and not necessarily long reigning champions as we see now. So it's tough for Julianna Pena. You know, she didn't have to only climb that mountain once; she has to climb it twice. And can she climb it again? What intrigue from both sides. I don't think it's going to be the best fight in the world. I think Amanda Nunes is going to win. I think she's going to be bang up for it. But will she? Can she? Is she going to be the same? Is she going to be, is she going to be different? We need to see it again. We need to see this again, because it's a fight that we should never have wanted to see again if it had gone the way we all thought it would go, you know? It's weird, because I tweeted before the fight, right? And I said, I hadn't even thought about Julianna Pena winning. Imagine if she did. It would literally change the whole world of MMA. And it did. It did, because now we're thinking about that fight again when we should never have been thinking about it. Now we're thinking, can Shevchenko beat her? Can Harrison beat her? Can she beat herself? Can she beat her own, mental demons to get back to the very top, to prepare correctly, to fight at the very best? Will she even fight again? And I think the only way to answer that is to have this fight again and beat Julianna Pena. And that's why it's one of the 3 fights in 2022 that I really, really want to see. So I leave it at that. Those are my 3 fights. Jones versus Gane. I'm going to go with that. But Jones versus Ngannou as well might be what I'm going for. Chimaev versus Usman for the welterweight title. And Amanda Nunes trying to get her title back from Julianna Pena. Let me know in the comment section below. Tweet me at John Sheehan BA, add Sherdog in as well to it. Let me know your 3 fights that you want to see next year, and we can have a bit of fun with it. And I'll leave it there. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.